Hello, my friends. It's your favorite existential thinker and philosopher, and also the best dressed in the existential philosophy curriculum, Soren Kierkegaard here, to talk to you a little bit about my take on some current events. And so I'd like to share my screen. I've been looking through the BBC recently and found an interesting article that I have some very strong opinions on. And the article begs the question, can physics prove if God exists? Specifically, as you go through the article, they talk a lot about whether empirical means at all can prove that God exists, and whether our modern scientific methods can get us to a better sense of God's existence as a physical, universal being. And so, as you can imagine, I have some very strong opinions on the topic, opinions that I'd like to share with you now. So first of all, here's my first thought. As I think about this article and think about what it's advocating, I immediately think back to a philosopher named Hegel, whose ideas I didn't agree with back in the 19th century, and I continue not to agree with to this day. Hegel really emphasized a rational, sort of logical understanding of God, which I believe zaps all of the faith element out of the human relationship with God that makes it so meaningful. Hegel emphasized how we could arrive at, I guess, a belief in God through our rational faculties. In addition, there were a variety of very common arguments in my day, sort of proofs of God's existence that were used, teleological, cosmological, and ontological proofs that were supposed to show conclusively that just as the trees outside or the water we drink exists, so too does God. And what I would say to that is not only is it insignificant, but it's actually detrimental to human flourishing through authentic faith in God to focus so heavily on whether we can prove that he exists. A term that's been coined that I use is this idea of a leap of faith. And this term is obviously attributed to me. And this idea of a leap of faith is really essential because I think it gets to the heart of what true, authentic religious belief in God should look like. Each of us sort of decides that we're going to follow God, regardless of whether there are paradoxes or things that our rational minds cannot comprehend. And as many modern people understand, there's many things like that in religion, many seemingly internal contradictions that we can't jump. When we think about Friedrich Nietzsche's famous pronouncement that God is dead, a lot of that comes because the rational mind can't be satisfied by a belief in God. And I believe that it's important not only that we recognize that, but that we embrace that in trying to have an authentic relationship with God, that we follow him despite any of those contradictions that we might see. And so trying to prove that God exists in a way that you would prove, that an apple exists or that the water or the rain exists in a physical sense is totally deterring from that authentic faith that I suggest we attempt to have outside of the realm of reason. So there's my first thought on the topic. And then my second thought on things is there's these three lifestyles that I've emphasized in my famous existential dialectic. First of all, the aesthetic lifestyle. Second, the ethical lifestyle. And third, the religious lifestyle. And one of the things that I really emphasize about the aesthetic and the ethical is that they seem to be sort of inadequate lifestyles, sort of these pathways that one could take to the religious life, but that often people do not, and that always leave people unfulfilled. And what I would emphasize in this scenario is that just as the ethical, just as the aesthetic lifestyles are sort of distractions that keep us from living the real religious lifestyle that can become so meaningful to us, so too is this modern insistence upon proving God based on rational means. In reality, the only thing that will allow human beings to flourish and to have meaningful lives in relation to God is how deeply they put their trust in him and how willing they are to make the sorts of existential leaps that will allow them to follow him wherever they go. So that's my take on things, and that's why I will not be reading the BBC again anytime soon. Thank you.